Hi, welcome to Moveeno Recap. Smashing the subscribe button is very valuable to us, so go ahead and leave us a like. Sit back and enjoy.
The first scene introduces Mark, a teenage boy who wakes up as his mother heads out for work on a typical sunny day in the bustling city. However, unbeknownst to others, Mark has been trapped in an endless time loop for an unknown duration. Mark experiences the same day every night after midnight and has become adept at his routine. He greets his family with ease, repeating their words at precisely the right moment, and even assists others in the neighborhood by anticipating their needs. Mark lends a hand to those around him by helping them locate lost keys, catch a ride on a truck, and offer directions to a woman in need. He even takes a bulldozer for a spin while the workers take a break. Mark has taken a special interest in Phoebe, a girl he assisted with directions. Mark has a crush on Phoebe and makes an effort to meet her at the community pool. While there, he rescues her from a beach ball accident and they begin to connect. After walking Phoebe home, he proposes they hang out sometime, but she declines sharply. Seeking solace, Mark turns to his best friend Henry, who's immersed in a video game where his character dies repeatedly. After the rejection, Mark ponders about having a second chance at life and utilizing his skills to aid others. He envisions himself preventing accidents, providing assistance, and making the world a better place. However, Henry cautions him that infinite possibilities mean endless chances to fail, and getting trapped in the loop could prevent him from moving on. When midnight strikes, Mark experiences the same day all over again due to the time loop. He goes about his routine and visits the community pool to meet Phoebe again. However, this time, another girl named Margaret saves Phoebe before Mark can. This sudden change in his routine surprises Mark, as no one has altered his daily routine since the loop began. Mark attempts to follow Margaret but only discovers a missing dog flyer that she dropped before driving away. He calls the number listed on the flyer but reaches someone else. Despite his efforts to locate Margaret in the city over the following days, she remains untraceable. Margaret appears almost like a ghost, but Mark sees someone leaving a large tip at a diner one evening and thinks it's her. He manages to find her and they chat, and to his surprise, discovers that Margaret is also experiencing the same time loop as him. This newfound connection between them brings them closer. Mark and Margaret spend time together, and he shares some entertaining coincidences he has noticed throughout his countless loops. When Margaret receives a call and has to leave, Mark requests her phone number, as they are the only ones aware of the time loop. In the following loops, Mark starts to enjoy the routine and begins to try out different hairstyles, sending her pictures of himself in hopes of a reaction. Despite not receiving a reply, Mark continues to pursue Margaret and eventually convinces her to meet up with him. They share their experiences of living through the time loop and discuss their aspirations. Mark shares his desire to attend art school and mentions his father's decision to quit his job and write a book on the Civil War. Margaret shares her ambition to work as a mission specialist for NASA and discusses her difficulty in finding a lost dog. She takes Mark to a peaceful lake, where they witness a rare sight of a kingfish catching a fish. Margaret explains that she first discovered the lake while searching for the lost dog, even though it was a futile effort. During their conversation, Margaret receives a call from someone named Jared and drops Mark off at his home before leaving to meet him. In the next loop, Mark and Margaret spend their day watching a group of skaters. Mark teaches Margaret how to drive a road roller and asks about Jared, but she says he's just a med student. Mark ponders whether the time loop is about appreciating perfect random moments and suggests they should look for them in town. In short, Mark and Margaret start looking for the perfect moments of beauty in their town to find meaning in their time loop. They compile a list of rare moments like a turtle stopping traffic and an elderly couple playing chess. A van's wings align with a man as a construction worker plays piano. Margaret insists on teaching Mark algebra because she can't be friends with someone who doesn't know logarithmic functions. Mark suggests to her to skip meeting Jared, but she refuses and leaves to talk to him on the phone after spending the whole day together. The next day, Mark searches for information about Jared on the internet but only finds useless details about some person from Subway. Mark shares his recent feelings with his friend Henry, who suggests taking Margaret somewhere special to show their genuine connection. Following his advice, Mark takes Margaret to his school gym, which he has transformed into a mock-up of Tranquility Base. They spend the day playing astronaut and it makes Margaret very happy. Mark tries to confess his feelings for her but hesitates and suggests they ride his bike around the school instead. Afterwards, they return to Mark's house and contemplate why they always wake up at the same time. While looking at pictures, Mark mentions that he hardly sees his mother because she works at night. Margaret discovers a map that Mark has made, which lists all the perfect moments they have shared together. Initially embarrassed, Mark admits that he draws the map every morning. However, Margaret finds it amusing and encourages him to pursue his passion for art. As they grow closer, Mark attempts to kiss Margaret, but she declines and says she only wants to be friends. Mark is disappointed but accepts her decision. They spend the remainder of the day together before Margaret departs at 6 p.m. The following morning, Mark asks about his mother for the first time. Later that day, Daniel confronts Mark about his future plans, but Mark vents his frustration about his uneventful life instead. He also accuses his dad of being a hypocrite for not supporting his dreams while quitting his own job to become a writer. Later, Mark talks to his younger sister, Emma, who informs him that their father was fired from his job and was too ashamed to admit it. In addition, Daniel desires to send Mark to art school, but their family's weak financial situation makes it impossible. Upon learning the truth, Mark feels remorse for yelling at his father earlier without knowing the full story. Later in the day, he meets with an algebra professor at school to discuss the root cause of the time loop. Mark presents his list of theories to the algebra professor, claiming that it's for an assignment. The professor assists him in discarding the unlikely theories, and they ultimately deduce that a singularity may be the source of the temporal anomaly. Furthermore, they conclude that escaping the singularity would also free them from the time loop. Mark becomes disillusioned with searching for perfect moments in their town as the time loop goes on. He tells Margaret to stop trivializing things and distracting him from the truth. Margaret misunderstands and thinks he's upset because she didn't kiss him. To cheer Mark up, she takes him to a show house where they spend the day smashing things. Afterwards, Mark shares his plan to escape the time loop by leaving the country and tells Margaret that their current situation isn't really living, but being stuck like everyone else who never accomplishes anything. Margaret feels dejected but agrees to his plan. The following day, they purchase tickets for Tokyo with optimism, and Mark believes that leaving town will end the time loop and enable them to rescue the world. While trying to unwind with an eye mask, Mark discovers that Margaret has vanished from the airplane. Despite his frantic efforts, he fails to locate her as Margaret withdraws at the last minute because of anxiety. Mark spends the remainder of the trip by himself, sketching the beautiful moments he and Margaret shared, including a drawing of Margaret donning a spacesuit. As the airplane passes the international dateline, Mark holds his breath in anticipation. But as soon as the moment arrives, he awakens in his bedroom again, signifying that his plan has failed. In the subsequent repetition, Mark decides to alter his approach by concentrating on other people rather than his own desires. He contacts his father and displays a newfound interest in his family's past by expressing a desire to learn about the Civil War. Mark also joins his younger sister Emma's football match and observes her scoring a goal that she hadn't before when he wasn't present in previous loops. Afterward, he enjoys playing chess with an elderly couple and admires the abilities of a construction worker playing the piano. Later in the day, he attempts to join some skaters in executing a trick, but it results in a fall and injury. Following his accident, Mark is transported to the hospital, where he idles away his time. Suddenly, he sees Margaret, prompting him to track her silently to a patient's room, where he witnesses something that leaves him speechless. As it turns out, Margaret is visiting her mother, who is suffering from cancer, and Jared is a medical student attending to her. Mark comes to the realization that he is not the story's primary focus, but rather, it is Margaret who takes center stage. He also understands that Subway has no role to play in this realization. As the day unfolds, Margaret feels the heaviness of her remorse and missed chances in her relationship with Mark. She awakens alone in her home and contemplates her ailing mother, whom she visits in the hospital. Margaret tells her mother about her broken relationship with Mark, but her mother comforts her by saying it's not too late to fix things. While leaving the hospital, Margaret sees the lost dog she has been looking for. Although she thinks about returning it to the owner, she decides to visit Henry instead. Margaret meets Henry and presents herself as Mark's friend. She assists him in winning a video game by utilizing a unique weapon. During their conversation, they discuss how the idea of death, whether in real life or a game, can be upsetting. Henry starts the game and shows Margaret a map, leading to a sudden realization for her. Later, she goes home and constructs a 3D model of the town's ideal moments with string. Upon completion, she notices that the model's shadow creates an image of a 4-dimensional cube with a missing vertex. Margaret figures out that the last event will occur at the community pool by 7 p.m. The next day, she wakes up early to visit her mother at the hospital. She becomes emotional and tearful, realizing that finding the final perfect moment to break the time loop could mean losing her mother. As the clock approaches 7 p.m., Margaret reaches the community pool where she sees Mark sitting alone. She sits beside him, admitting that he was correct. The perfect moments were interconnected in a pattern. Margaret tells Mark that there is a missing moment needed to end the loop. Mark confesses that he saw her at the hospital and assures her that he won't take her away from her mother. Margaret admits that she wanted time to stop when she discovered her mother's sickness and wonders if the loop was a result of her wish. However, she now realizes that Mark was also trapped in the loop to rescue her. Margaret feels relieved and kisses Mark, creating the missing perfect moment. She visits her mother at the hospital that night and says her final goodbye. Later, Margaret and Mark wait anxiously outside, unsure of what will happen. When Mark's watch strikes midnight, it begins to rain, indicating the time loop has ended. In the morning, they return the lost dog to its owner, and the movie ends. If you enjoyed this recap, please subscribe, hit the like button, and turn on notifications to see more videos like this. Thanks for watching.